The winning blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Time to find out what's new in Denver. And again, this is a really good football team in the Denver Broncos. Not much is going to change when you are a team that was as dominant as the Denver Broncos were in the 2012 season. There is not a lot you want to tinker with. Maybe a move here, maybe a subtle change there, and boom, you're back to where you want to be. So if you're the Denver Broncos, you want this thing to look much like it did a season ago. With a few changes here and there, we'll talk about all of the changes that have occurred in Denver. So we'll be talking about what's new in Denver. This is courtesy of YouTube subscriber Nathaniel Bradley. Got the Broncos up. Remember, if you want your team or any team for that matter to be next, simply leave a comment at the bottom of this video urging me to make your team next. You have to be the first to do so next, and the team that you want to see next, and they will be up next on this segment, What's New In. So before we can get to what's new in Denver, we got to get rid of the old. So it's out with the old with the Denver Broncos. As always, to go out with the old, in with the new, whatever the case may be, I need the help of two of my trusty assistants. Of course, I'm talking about my big board behind me and my handy dandy pointer. I've got both. Let's get to the big board and see what is out with the old in Denver. You got to start at the top. Your head coach is still there in John Fox. Offensive coordinator has changed, however. And so Mike McCoy, no longer your offensive coordinator. He has gotten himself a head coaching gig in the National Football League. Now he is with the San Diego Chargers. So you don't have to go far to find your good old buddy, Mike McCoy. He's right up the street coaching your division rivals in the San Diego Superchargers. So no more Mike McCoy as your offensive coordinator. We'll talk about who his replacement is a little bit later. Let's talk about what else is old in Denver as we move on from what was the 2012 season and move into 2013. You start at the running back position, and Willis McGahee, no longer a Bronco. Willis made a statement in the offseason. He said, hey, I want to be the feature back in Denver. And the Broncos said, what you talking about, Willis? And as soon as he made that statement, not a week later was Willis McGahee looking for a gig in the National Football League. Has not found one to this point. Solid guy, has been a good ball carrier for the Broncos, someone that you can rely on when healthy. Will put the ball on the ground occasionally, but does not matter anymore. Willis McGahee was a solid acquisition to this team a couple of years ago. He's no longer on this roster. There is a deep pool of talent at the running back position. It was a numbers crunch. And the way I see it here is I was once told that if there are two CEOs in a company that think the same, one of them is not necessary. I felt the same way about Willis McGahee and Noshawn Moreno. If you got two running backs that do the exact same thing, one of them is not necessary. And in this case, Willis McGahee and Noshawn Moreno do the same thing. Noshawn Moreno, a little bit younger. You go with the younger guy, more talent, more upside there if you are the Denver Broncos. So Willis McGahee is the odd man out. You look at wide receiver Brandon Stokely. Him and Peyton Manning make beautiful music together. And I'm pretty sure if the Broncos have any kind of injuries of note at the wide receiver position, the first person they'll probably call is good old B. Stoke. However, with the talent on this team and some of the acquisitions made in the offseason via draft and free agency, a guy like Brandon Stokely, even though he can still play at a relatively high level, as you saw last year, he's not necessary. You've got guys that are younger, more talented, faster, can do a lot of things that Brandon Stokely at his age, frankly, can't do as well. But we all know B. Stoke can still get it done, but he's no longer a necessity in Denver. He is out. You look at wide receiver Matt Willis, strictly a special teams guy for the Broncos. He's no longer on the roster. he never really developed into the receiving threat that the Broncos hoped he would. He's now in Detroit. You won't miss him. Probably didn't even notice he was gone. You look at safety Jim Leonard, another guy on this roster that was a rotational depth guy, wasn't a starter for the Broncos, but in a pinch, if you needed a guy to come in and start at the safety position, Jim Leonard would make a great replacement for your starter. He's no longer on this roster. He's now in New Orleans. You look at cornerback Tracy Porter. What a waste of money that was. If you are the Denver Broncos, you were hoping this guy was going to come in and kind of be that transitional filler, that guy that fills in that gap between Champ Bailey and some of the younger corners on this team. As Champ kind of fades to black, Tracy Porter would be working his way in as the new guy in Denver, as your number one corner. Instead, he rarely saw the field, had some issues medically, couldn't get on the field, and really wasn't a contributor in 2012. And you realize, why are we paying this guy? We don't need him. We had a stellar season without him. He's gone. He's now in Oakland. You look at linebacker Keith Brooking. I was pleasantly surprised with Keith Brooking in 2012. I thought he was done after he left Dallas. I said, no way is this guy going to land another gig in the National Football League. Lo and behold, he lands in Denver. And I thought he played magnificent for the Broncos in 2012. I mean, in limited duty, Keith Brooking made an impact on this defense. I was really thoroughly impressed with what he brought to the table. Thought that he was a guy that you could probably bring back on the cheap and get steady production out of a guy that's also a leader in the locker room as well. But the Broncos are looking to get younger in certain areas, and linebacker happens to be one of them. So Keith Brooking, a 15 or 16-year veteran in this league, no longer needed on the Broncos roster. You look at the next guy, and this one shouldn't even be on this list. This one has to be a sore subject for Bronco fans everywhere, as Elvis has left the building. You've probably heard that more times than you would have liked to have heard it over the last 3 months or so. But Elvis Dumervil is on this list, and he should not be. This is a classic tale of mismanagement on both parties involved. Elvis Dumervil and his agent could have handled it, or former agent could have handled this situation a lot better. So could the Denver Broncos. Nonetheless, both of them botched this situation. He's no longer on your football team. The Broncos go from having one of, if not the best, pass rushing duo in the league to just having one heck of a rusher in Von Miller. Now you got to find that guy to go across from him. We'll talk about a guy that you're looking to have replace Elvis Dumervil, but I tell you what, there is no replacing Elvis Dumervil. You'll find that out during the course of the season, but he's no longer on your football team. He's now with the enemy, the team that put you out of the postseason last year, the Super Bowl defending champion, Baltimore Ravens. You look at linebacker DJ Williams. Simply put, that suspension that he suffered last season at the hands of the league for substance abuse basically spelled the end of the road for DJ Williams in Denver. He missed about 6 or 7 games, maybe 8, 6 for sure. And by the time he came back, the Broncos didn't need him. They were playing really good football. The defense was coming along. He was a guy that was expendable at that point, and hence he's in Chicago now. You look at defensive tackle Justin Bannon. Here's a guy that started 15 out of 16 regular season games for you, was solid in the interior of that defense. But again, as an aging veteran, you can find guys that can do what Justin Bannon does, but younger and a little bit more athletically gifted. And so Justin Bannon is out in Denver. You look at another guy, defensive tackle Ty Warren. He was supposed to be the guy in the middle of this defense for the future and moving forward. You got him from New England, and you thought Ty Warren could be the guy that we can build this interior of our line around. You went out and got him. You thought, hey, Ty Warren is going to be a great acquisition for us, and injuries took hold of this guy. He was never the player that you thought he could be in Denver, and he never really got a shot to be because the injuries wouldn't allow it. Ty Warren, no longer a Denver Bronco. So that's out with the old with the Broncos. Now let's go in with the new with the Denver Broncos. So now we go in with the new with the Denver Broncos. And again, you got to start at the top and work your way down. You got the same defensive coordinator in Jack Del Rio, same head coach, but you have a different offensive coordinator. Adam Gase is your new offensive coordinator. Here's a guy that was your wide receivers coach, was bumped up to quarterbacks coach last season when Peyton Manning came on board, did a wonderful job there. And teams want to keep the continuity if at all possible. You saw the same thing happen in Carolina when Rod Chazinski got a head coaching job with the Browns. The Panthers elevated Mike Shula from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator. Same thing here. Adam Gase elevated from quarterbacks coach because these guys have intimate knowledge of what's going on with the offense. They're in the rooms when the game plan is being put together. So there's not a lot to change when you just bump up the quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator. And so Adam Gase will be your new play caller on the offensive side of the football. And I don't expect a lot to change there. We'll talk about that in philosophical changes. You look at some more new stuff in Denver, and we start with wide receiver Wes Welker. The New England Patriots loss is your game. This is a guy that has no business being on your football team. The Patriots should have had Wes Welker back. He should be in a Patriots uniform. They dropped the ball on this one, and I think they did it intentionally. Nonetheless, it does not matter. The Broncos are the beneficiary here because you have a nasty tandem out wide in Decker and Thomas, and now you've got the ultimate weapon in the slot in Wes Welker. This is really starting to look like the most potent passing attack we've seen in the National Football League, at least on paper, going into the 2013 season with Decker and Thomas and the production that they're putting up out wide. You put Welker and his production and numbers up into the slot. Tell you what, it's going to be pretty hard to stop this offensive passing attack if these guys stay healthy and are clicking on all cylinders. Wes Welker comes in and right away gives this Denver Broncos slot game some credibility right off the bat. And not to say that you weren't getting it from a guy like Brandon Stokely, who I thought played really well last season, but Brandon Stokely is no Wes Welker. And so huge pickup for the Denver Broncos. You look at offensive guard Luis Vasquez, and you go to San Diego, and you'll hear this a lot. This isn't the first time nor the last that the Broncos have went up the street and went shopping at the San Diego Chargers store. It's really easy to go and shop at a store that's close to your house. There's probably a store maybe 5 or 7 minutes away from your house, and you frequent it a lot. Maybe it's a Walmart, maybe it's a Farm Fresh, maybe it's a Food Line. Who knows what it is? But there's a store 5 or 7 minutes away from your house. And you know exactly what everything is because you're in that store very often. And I equate that to what the Denver Broncos did in free agency this season. They went out and got a lot of guys that they see often in the division from the San Diego Chargers, and they brought them onto their roster. Hey, you don't want that? We'll take it. And it's so easy to go into the store when you know where everything is, get what you want, and come out and be back home in less than 15 minutes. Same thing with the Denver Broncos. They knew exactly what they wanted off of the San Diego Chargers roster because they see these guys twice a season. They know exactly what they can do, what they can bring to the table. They went in, got their man, came out. No harm done. No harm, no foul. They get Luis Vasquez, probably the best offensive lineman on that San Diego Chargers football team. Pluck him away, weaken their offensive line while strengthening theirs all the while. And so great move by the Broncos to strengthen an offensive line that I think is starting to come together and gel. A nice acquisition in Luis Vasquez. You look at cornerback Quentin Jammer. Is another San Diego Charger that you plucked away from this football team and put them onto yours. This is one of those signings that smells like a team that wants to win now. Quentin Jammer is a 10 or 11-year veteran in this league. Still got some tread on those tires, can still play some very meaningful snaps for you, but he's a veteran in this league. But the Broncos, who already have a lot of veterans, like a Champ Bailey in that secondary, don't care. They are looking to win now. And some of the mistakes that they made in the postseason will be alleviated if guys like Quentin Jammer, who are much more savvy, are on the field they won't make those mistakes. And so the Broncos are looking to win now, and they're getting players that they feel like can help them win right now. Quentin Jammer is definitely a guy that can come in and help you do that. Another cornerback that you got in free agency, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, or as he's more commonly known around the league, DRC. Here's a guy that's a younger corner, which is what you were looking for Tracy Porter to be. A younger guy that can take that torch from Champ Bailey and be the number one guy in Denver moving forward once Champ Bailey fades to black. And Tracy Porter was supposed to be that guy. He was supposed to be the new torch bearer. That didn't happen. So now Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, who signed a relatively small deal, I believe it was a one-year deal if I'm not mistaken, will come in, and if he gets it done, he'll be the new guy in Denver. We'll see how this shakes out. But here's a guy that can play the cornerback position. Is he a heck of a tackler? No. But he's a guy that will cover, will make plays on the football, is extremely athletic and long. You'll love what he does out wide as a cornerback. The question is, will he help support in the run game? That's what you got to ask yourself. But this is a solid corner that if he's at the top of his game, you're getting a guy that's going to make plays for you on this defense. You look at linebacker Stuart Bradley. Here's a guy you get relatively cheap. He went to Arizona for a big payday, and he absolutely fell flat on his face. That deal did not work out at all. He was horrendous in Arizona. Didn't play football last year. Now he's in Denver, and I think a guy like Keith Brooking was a casualty because of a guy like Stuart Bradley. The Broncos look at Stuart Bradley as a younger version of Keith Brooking. Is that a mistake? Probably. Does it matter to the Broncos at this point? No, because they're getting a guy that's going to be relatively cheap, that's going to come in and compete for some playing time. Is he going to start? No, but he's a guy that can come in, much like Keith Brooking did for you last year, in run situations on first and second downs. When you think it's a run, come in and stuff up the run. And that's what the Broncos are probably going to look for from Stuart Bradley. So it's a solid acquisition, low risk. And if he works out, you love the move by the Broncos. You look at linebacker Sean Phillips. Here we are shopping at the store right up the street again. San Diego Chargers product here in Sean Phillips. Here's the guy that's supposed to be the replacement for Elvis Dumervil. Let me be the first to tell you that there is no replacement for Elvis Dumervil. But I tell you what, Sean Phillips isn't a bad constellation prize. Here's a guy that can get pressure on the quarterback. You know that. He's in the division. You saw him twice a year for many years in San Diego. He's wreaked havoc on that very Denver Broncos team that he now calls home. And so you think this guy still has something left in the tank. We will see how explosive Sean Phillips is, because I think he's starting to wane in his production. But if he can still get it done and be a consistent pass rusher on the other side of Von Miller and do his job adequately, because I don't think he can be a Elvis Dumervil, but I think he can come in and do enough to keep some of that attention and heat off of Von Miller. We'll see how that all works out for the Broncos, but Sean Phillips is now a Denver Bronco. You look at defensive tackle Terrence Knighting, pot roast, as he's known around the league. He's going to come in and fill up the middle of your defense. He's going to be a run-stuffing nightmare for offensive lines around this league. Question is, can you keep that motor running high with Terrence Knighting? When it's hot and that motor is running, this guy is a force in the middle of the defense. When it's cold and he's not getting it done, he's a guy that you do not want on the football field. So we'll see which one do you get. Do you get the hot Terrence Knighting with the motor running strong, or do you get the cold motor that you got to start up? We'll see how Terrence Knighting fares in Denver, but that's another nice acquisition for the Denver Broncos. So you look now at the draft picks coming into this team, and you start with, and before I even start there, if you're looking for an extensive breakdown of these draft picks, 2013 NFL draft wrap-up that I did on the Broncos and every team in the National Football League is available on my YouTube channel, Louis T. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so. Check it out. But I'm just going to briefly go over these draft picks. I'm not going to give you analysis. If you're looking for breakdowns of these players, go to the 2013 NFL draft wrap-up for that. Defensive tackle Sylvester Williams out of North Carolina, first selection for the Broncos, more beef up front. Here's a guy that not only can stop the run, but they think he can get pressure on the quarterback as well. You look at running back Monty Ball in the second round, a guy that made someone like Willis McGahee a little bit expendable. Cornerback Kayvon Webster in the third round, defensive end Quanterus Smith in the fifth round, wide receiver Tavares King in the fifth round, offensive tackle Vincent Painter in the sixth round, quarterback Zach Dysert in the seventh round. So Broncos having a draft that they feel like, I think 4 or 5 of these guys are going to come in and contribute right away. We'll see how this all works for the Broncos if they can get these guys to come in and pay immediate dividends. Maybe they stash a couple of these guys on the practice squad and work with them. I don't know how that works. But I tell you what, a lot of these guys, if not all of them, will make this roster. Now let's switch gears to some players that probably and most likely won't make the roster. Your undrafted free agent rookies. There's 16 of them in all. Let's go over them one by one. So we start with quarterback Ryan Katz out of San Diego State, running back C.J. Anderson out of Cal, wide receiver Quincy McDuffie out of Central Florida, wide receiver Camonte Bateman out of New Mexico State, wide receiver Lamar Thomas out of New Mexico, tight end Lucas Reed out of New Mexico, offensive guard Manis Foketti out of West Texas A&M, defensive back Aaron Hester out of UCLA, defensive back Ross Rasner out of Arkansas, linebacker Lorente McCray out of Florida, linebacker Damian Holmes out of UCLA, linebacker Uona Kavenga out of BYU, defensive end John Yabodi out of Temple, defensive end Lanston Tanyi out of Colorado State, defensive tackle Romney Fuga out of BYU, and punter Ryan Dewar out of Kansas State. Those are your undrafted free agent rookies, 16 in all, looking to crack this roster. Be surprised if 2 or 3 of these guys made the roster. Look for one guy, if that, to crack this roster, because this is a veteran-laden team with a lot of veteran players. They're looking to win now. And normally, and this is not always the case, but normally, free agent rookies aren't going to help you out that much in any given season. And so I don't expect many of these guys, if any, to make this roster, but you just never know in the National Football League. If they see a talented guy flash, maybe they stash him on the practice squad, or maybe, just maybe, he cracks the 53-man roster. We'll see. But with a team built like this Broncos team, ready to win now, I don't see many undrafted free agent rookies making this roster. Now we'll move on to any philosophical changes in Denver. As you look at the philosophical changes for the Denver Broncos, there are not many here to be found. And like I said earlier in the video, when you're a team on the cusp of doing something great like the Broncos feel like they are, you don't need to tinker with many things. A few guys coming in here, a few guys leaving out of the back door there, but the philosophy doesn't change. Unless you lose a coordinator, and in the case of the Broncos, they did lose offensive coordinator Mike McCoy to a head coaching spot in San Diego, but they just bumped up quarterbacks coach Adam Gase, and it makes sense. Again, you want to keep the continuity. You want everything to stay relatively the same because of the success you had a season ago. No need to ruffle many feathers here. And so the offense is going to look a lot like it did a season ago. The only thing that's going to vary somewhat is probably the effectiveness of the run game. Adding a guy like Luis Vasquez is definitely going to help your rushing attack, and adding a guy like Monty Ball is definitely going to add some more flavor to the mix in the run game as well, give you a little bit more athletic burst and ability there. And Wes Welker in the slot is going to transform this offense from a dynamic offense to a superpower type of offense in Denver. Look, as good as a guy like Brandon Stokely was for you a season ago, and I thought Brandon Stokely made some magnificent catches. Him and Peyton still make beautiful music together. As solid as he was for you in the slot, that production that you got from him is going to pale in comparison to what you'll get out of Wes Welker. And I tell you what, with those two beasts you have out wide in Eric Decker and Demaryius Thomas, you add Welker to the slot, And it just becomes that much more of a problem for opposing defenses against the Broncos. I look forward to watching this Broncos offense work. And I tell you what, this offense is going to look a lot like it did last season, but it's going to be even more explosive than it was a season ago. You look at the defensive side of football, and here I have a few questions. Because of the Elvis Dumervil debacle, now there's a hole on one side of your defense because this guy got consistent pressure on the quarterback. You can't replace double-digit sacks in this league. I can't state that enough. And so Von Miller, who we all know is an animal getting to the quarterback, is still going to do his thing. But the reason why he was allowed to do his thing so eloquently and so easily was because he was getting one-on-one matchups, because you couldn't just focus in on Von Miller, because on the opposite side, there was another guy that could get to the quarterback equally as well in Elvis Dumervil. That's no longer the case. Now you're putting Sean Phillips over there, who is no slouch in his own right, but he is no Elvis Dumervil. So I want to see how that dynamic is going to work. But you're adding in some new pieces, especially in the interior of this defense. You're adding in corners like Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie and Quentin Jammer to the mix, some veterans that can come in and help this defense. And this defense was already at the top of its game last season, ranking #1 in total defense a season ago. And so you're looking for big things from this Broncos team. It's going to look much of the same for Jack Del Rio and his crew. I expect the Broncos to be right up there, the best of them in the league in 2013. Can't wait to see what the Broncos are going to do. But as far as philosophical changes are concerned, you're going to see much of the same from the Broncos on the offensive side of the football as well as the defensive side of the football. And that's going to do it for the Denver Broncos. And that's what's new in Denver.